Before diving into this story, I just want to say that life doesn't always go the way you expect. Sometimes, people come into your life not to follow society's rules, and sometimes you find yourself caught in emotions you never knew existed. That is exactly what happened to me. Looking back now, I'm not proud of it, but it shaped the person I am today. I wasn't prepared for how one decision could lead to a web of secrets, confusion, guilt, and complications, with someone I could never admit my feelings for. Let me explain before you jump to conclusions. I grew up in a family that wasn't particularly close. We were polite but not overly warm. My younger brother, Liam, is 5 years younger than me. For most of our lives, we lived in completely different worlds. I was focused on high school when he was still watching cartoons. I went off to college when he was just entering the awkward teenage years. But when I came home after graduation, something had changed. Liam was no longer the awkward, shy kid. I remember looking at him and realizing he'd grown up. Suddenly, he wasn't just my little brother anymore, he was smart, kind, and, surprisingly, charming. At first, I thought I was imagining things. How could I be attracted to someone I practically helped raise? But the feeling was there, undeniable and unshakable. One evening, we were sitting in the backyard under the stars, just talking. It started innocently enough. We reminisced about childhood memories, teasing each other about silly things we'd done. But then he said something that left me stunned. "You know, I've always admired you," Liam said softly. "But lately, I feel like I see you differently." I didn't know what to say. My heart raced, and not in the way it should have. I laughed nervously and tried to change the subject, but his words lingered in the air between us. That was the beginning. What Liam said that night was innocent enough, but it opened a door I couldn't close. Over the next few weeks, things only became more complicated, and I started to recognize feelings I wasn't supposed to have. After that night under the stars, I tried to convince myself that Liam's words didn't mean anything, that he was just being sentimental, maybe even a bit awkward. But deep down, I couldn't escape the way he looked at me, as if I were someone more than just his sister. I threw myself into life, job applications, friends, anything to keep my mind busy. But somehow, Liam always found a way to be near me. He'd stop by my room to chat about his day, linger in the kitchen while I cooked, and sit too close when we watched TV together. At first, I let him. I told myself I was overthinking it. Families are supposed to be close, right? But this wasn't just closeness, it was tension, an unspoken pull between us that I was too scared to acknowledge, but too weak to resist. The breaking point came on a rainy Sunday afternoon. It had been pouring all day, and we were both stuck inside, bored and restless. Liam suggested we play a card game like we used to when we were kids. "You don't stand a chance," I teased, trying to keep things light. "We'll see about that," he replied with a grin. As we played, the jokes and laughter started to feel different. Every brush of his hand as he passed me cards felt deliberate. Every glance lingered too long. My heart raced, and it wasn't because of the game. At one point, I reached across the table for the deck, and our hands touched. It was just a small moment, but it felt like an electric shock. I froze, and so did he. We locked eyes, and for a second, it felt like the whole world had stopped. "You feel it too, don't you?" he asked softly. I didn't know how to respond. Denying it felt like a lie, but admitting it would change everything. "I don't know what you're talking about," I whispered, pulling my hand back and standing up quickly. But Liam didn't let it go. He followed me into the living room, his expression serious. "Don't do this," he said. "Don't pretend this isn't happening." "It's wrong," I blurted out. "We can't. We can't feel this way." "Why not?" he challenged. "I know what we're supposed to be, but I can't help how I feel. And I don't think you can either." I had no answer. All I knew was that I felt torn in two directions, and no matter which way I turned, someone would get hurt. One evening, I found a notebook on the coffee table. At first, I thought it was mine, but when I opened it, I realized it belonged to Liam. It was filled with sketches, notes, and little poems I never knew he wrote. But what caught my attention was a page near the end. It wasn't labeled, but as I read it, my heart sank. It was about me. He had written about how he saw me not just as a sister, but as someone he admired, someone he couldn't stop thinking about. It was raw and honest, and it scared me. I knew I shouldn't have read it. I knew I should have put it down and walked away, but I couldn't. Each word pulled me deeper into a place I wasn't sure I could escape. That notebook changed everything. It wasn't just feelings anymore, it was ink on paper, undeniable. And the more I tried to fight it, the more I felt like I was losing control. I spent the whole night staring at that notebook, my mind spinning in a million directions. A part of me wanted to confront Liam and demand an explanation, but another part of me knew exactly what he would say. The words in that notebook were everything I had been avoiding. They weren't just about admiration or sibling closeness, but about longing and love. And though I didn't want to admit it, they reflected feelings I had buried for weeks. The next morning, I avoided him completely. I couldn't face him after what I had read. But Liam wasn't someone you could avoid for long. That evening, he found me sitting in the backyard, staring at the horizon. "You've been quiet all day," he said, sitting next to me. "I'm just thinking," I replied, trying to sound normal. "About what?" he asked, his tone cautious yet curious. I hesitated, nervously running my fingers along the hem of my sweater. "I found your notebook," I admitted, not looking at him. There was a pause, and then I heard him exhale sharply. "I didn't mean for you to see that," he said quietly. "I know," I replied. "But I did. And now I don't know what to do about it." "About what?" he asked, his voice slightly trembling. "About us," I said finally, turning to look at him. His expression was a mixture of fear and hope, and it broke my heart. "I don't want to make things harder for you," he said. "But I can't pretend I don't feel what I feel. I've tried, and it's impossible." "I don't know if I can do this, Liam," I said, my voice cracking. "It's too much. Too complicated." "It doesn't have to be," he said, reaching for my hand. "We don't have to figure everything out right now. I just need to know if you feel the same way." I wanted to say no. I wanted to tell him it was all a mistake, that we could go back to how things were before. But I couldn't lie anymore. "It's true," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "But that doesn't make it right." Admitting it set off a chain reaction I couldn't stop. For the next few weeks, Liam and I danced around our feelings, never crossing the line, but never quite stepping away from it either. Every conversation, every shared moment, felt like walking a tightrope, one wrong step away from falling. And then came the night that changed everything. It was late, and everyone else in the house was asleep. I was in the kitchen, unable to sleep, when Liam walked in. "You're up late," he said, grabbing a glass of water. "Can't sleep," I replied, avoiding his gaze. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he set his glass down and turned to me. "We need to talk about this," he said, gesturing between us. "Even though I already know the answer, I can't keep pretending everything is fine when it's not. I need to know where we stand." "I don't know," I said honestly. "I don't know what to do, Liam. Every part of me is telling me this is wrong, but I can't stop feeling what I feel." "Then stop fighting it," he said, stepping closer. "I can't," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's too much. It's too dangerous." "Let me make it simple," he said, his voice steady. "Do you want me to walk away? Because if that's what you need, I'll do it. I'll walk away and never bring this up again. But if you want me to stay..." Liam's ultimatum left me speechless. He was offering me a way out, but was that what I wanted? I had to decide, and I knew that no matter what I chose, there would be no going back. Liam's words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. He stood there, waiting for my answer, his eyes locked on mine. My heart felt like it was being squeezed. This was the moment everything would change, one way or another. Liam, I began, my voice trembling. I don't want to lose you, but I don't know how we can make this work without ruining everything. His expression faltered for a moment, but his determination didn't waver. I'm not asking for everything to be figured out right now, he said. I'm just asking you to choose. Do you want me to stay or not? Tears welled up in my eyes. I wanted to say no, to tell him to walk away so we could pretend this never happened. But the truth was, I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. I don't want you to go, I whispered. For a moment, he looked like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Then, without a word, he stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. It wasn't romantic or suggestive, just comforting, safe, and understanding. We'll figure it out, he said softly. One step at a time. The days that followed were a strange mix of relief and fear. Liam and I became more careful around others, acutely aware of how our interactions might be perceived. At the same time, we started finding moments where we could talk openly without the weight of secrecy crushing us. But peace didn't last long. Secrets have a way of coming out, and ours was no exception. One evening, while Liam and I were talking quietly on the back porch, our older cousin Ellie suddenly walked outside. We froze, startled and unsure how much she had heard. What's going on here? She asked, narrowing her eyes. Nothing, I said quickly. Ellie wasn't stupid. She looked between the two of us, her gaze sharp and probing. You two have been acting weird for weeks, she said. Don't tell me it's nothing. Liam started to say something, but I cut him off. We're just spending more time together, that's all, I said, trying to sound casual. Yeah, and that's what's weird, Ellie replied. You two were never this close before. What changed? Panic rose in my chest. Ellie was the last person we wanted to suspect anything. She was blunt, observant, and had no problem calling people out. Nothing's changed, I said, forcing a smile. We're just getting along better these days. Ellie didn't look convinced, but she dropped the subject. That night, Liam and I sat in my room, the tension between us palpable. She knows something's up, I said, my voice barely a whisper. I'll handle it, Liam replied. How? I asked, my voice breaking. This is hard enough without someone snooping around. What if she finds out? What if she tells someone? Then we'll deal with it, he said firmly. But I'm not walking away just because things are getting hard. His determination was comforting, but it didn't erase the fear gnawing at me. Ellie wasn't one to let things go easily, and I knew it was only a matter of time before she started asking questions again. The walls were closing in, and I could feel the weight of our secret pressing down harder than ever. Liam and I had made a choice, but could we survive the fallout?